Hi, I'm Matthew Schwartz with Information Security Media Group, and it's my pleasure to welcome Chris Jilks, Insider Threat Consultant and Director of Sales EMEA with Veriato. Chris, thanks very much for being here today.
Pleasure to be here, good to see you, Matt.
So we're going to be talking insider threat, and insider threat for me is one of those concepts. If you didn't think about it, if you didn't think it was a risk, certainly in recent years, seeing what seems to be massive increase in insider threat attacks that have been happening in Britain, the US, and beyond, this seems to be like it should be very top of mind now for executives.
Yeah, absolutely. It needs to be right at the top of the agenda. I think at the minute everyone's familiar with cyber threat and attack, and the forgotten piece of that is the human element. And you know what? At the end of the day, 60% of all attacks, emanate from a human being. So it's about understanding the effect that people can have, and humans are fallible at the end of the day. You program the machine, but not the human.
There's a huge emphasis now on cybersecurity, and do you think that, there's trends, things come, things go, data breaches are big, data breaches have been big for a while.
Yeah.
All the legislation, the regulation we have, it drives people's focus. Certainly though, insiders, long been a threat before, it'll long be a threat into the future.
Yeah.
How are organizations that you're working with starting to think about this? Are they seeing this as a challenge that can be managed, mitigated, moderated?
I think the priority has always been around protecting from cyber and putting up firewalls and things like that. But ultimately, an insider is someone within the organisation. People are recognising it, but there's still a worrying amount of organisations that we'll talk to where actually they haven't prioritised it. It sits very low down their priority list. And actually, it's the one thing that that produces the majority of attacks. A lot of you'll see in the press a lot of attacks, maybe DDoS attacks, denial of service, maybe other attacks emanate actually from a human, because it's a bit like not closing the gate and letting the horse bolt. It's too late. Mm-hmm. It can be inadvertent, it can be malicious. There's a huge mixture. It's a huge issue right now.
Well, you bring up a great point with the insider threat in terms of it being inadvertent. Because certainly with data breaches, since the dawn of the data breach, a lot of it has been inadvertent. It's been people disposing of something incorrectly, for example, or leaving something out on their desk that shouldn't have been there in certain environments, etc. So it's not necessarily the malicious insider that we're focusing on here.
No, and 20 years ago, I was talking to a lot of organisations around the square mile here, and talking to them about paperwork left out overnight on printers, for instance. Talking about people leaving the building with downloaded data. It still happens. We've moved on technologically, but we haven't moved on with the understanding that somebody inside the organisation can still do a lot of damage, and whether that be to your IP, whether that be to maybe to your customers, because you can have a knock-on. Something that somebody in your organisation does today could well affect the organisation that supplies you. And you've got a lot of investors with share prices, which can fluctuate on bad news. So it's a huge risk.
So with the organizations that you're working with, in terms of managing those risks, the challenges they're facing, presumably a lot of them are attempting to monitor employees. What are some of the best practices there? What are some of the challenges, though, that they encounter as they try to go about this? Because obviously, if it was easy to spot a threatening insider, we would have all done it by now. So they're trying to put policies, I suppose, cultural changes, technological approaches in place. Where should they be aiming for it from a best practice standpoint?
I think at the minute everyone accepts that an antivirus is a necessary thing to have on an endpoint. But for us, we believe that actually having analytics and monitoring what people are doing should also be a necessary evil. It's something where actually it's where the interaction happens. It's on the endpoint where users are interfacing with others. Everything goes through that point, and for us, it's not just about monitoring. You've got to take it a stage further. You have a black box on an airplane, but you only need it once the airplane's crashed. Probably not the best analogy.
Not a great metaphor for
but ultimately, it's true. An insider threat, 206 days to actually find out on average that you've been turned over by an insider. By that point, they've left the business. They've taken your secrets. They probably monetized that. So it's about protecting your business and having a holistic view. actually putting something in place that doesn't just monitor, but alerts you to the fact that you've got somebody here who's doing wrong. Maybe they are, things like changing their language. Maybe they're sending erroneous emails. Maybe they're sending things out of the business that shouldn't be going out of the business. Things like salespeople. Salespeople, quite often there's a high turnover of salespeople, and they could be leaving with a client list, and that could be hugely damaging to your business if they go to your competitor with that same list. So it's about businesses thinking more holistically and understanding what they've got and how to protect it. And I think for the future, they've got to think like that. There's no point waiting until the horse has bolted. You've got to be there. You've got to have it in place now and monitor all the endpoints. It's got to be on the endpoint because that's the data where the data is transacted.
So not just monitoring, making it actionable and applying,
Yeah.
I suppose, a different view, a different sense of risk, perhaps even, to different user populations inside your organization.
Yeah, and I think that's all about understanding, working with a partner such as Veriato, where you can fine-tune the solution to your own business, within your industry, to job types, and actually you use machine learning nowadays. Machine learning gives you the ability to actually understand someone's job, and when they deviate from that bandwidth that they have, then it's probably a sign that maybe not everything's right and you need to investigate. So an alert goes out and says, listen, it's identified that whoever has been doing something perhaps that isn't within their remit, and couple that with the artificial intelligence piece, where what you're doing is you're looking at behaviours and identifying wrong behaviours, and straight away you can realise you've got something that's going on that you can actually act upon. And a lot of companies right now would love to roll back time and do that and avoid all the bad press they've received.
Wish they'd been keeping a closer eye on
Absolutely,
things.
yes.
Yes. So obviously marching orders when it comes to dealing with the insider threat. Well, Chris, thanks so much for your time and insights today.
Thank you. Been a pleasure.
For me as well, thank you. I've been speaking with Chris Jilks about the insider threat. Chris is from Veriato. I'm Matthew Schwartz with Information Security Media Group. Thanks for joining us.